three options only if you're an alcoholic: recovery, institution, or you got death. Everybody gets to choose their bottom. He goes, you don't have an anger problem. You have a trauma problem. There's no excuse for you to take another drug or alcohol. You need to treat this as life or death. If you want to die, go back to using. If you want to die, go back to drinking. It's so freaking important to realize that's Satan. He's putting those people into your life to try and draw you away from Jesus and try and draw you away from good sobriety. I literally aimed my car at like 90 miles an hour right at a telephone pole. I can't even kill myself, right?
There's more for your life. There's a purpose for your life. That is why it was not your time.
I know I did a lot of damage to people. I hurt a lot of people with my alcohol. I do care about people. I don't like to hurt people, but I did it a lot when I was drinking.
I feel alive. I feel alive.
What does it take to rebuild your life, find faith, and stay sober for over 30 years? Today's guest, Glenn Derby, knows the answer. From NFL to healing from complex PTSD, his journey is nothing short of extraordinary. Glenn has lived through the highs of professional football and the lows of addiction and trauma. Now he's here to share his powerful story and the wisdom he's gained along the way. So, Glenn, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Megan. I'm very happy to be here. I'm glad we've got a chance to connect.
Yeah, me too. So let's get into your story. So you played, well, first a little fun fact. You played for the Saints and the Packers.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
It was a few years ago, but yes, it was. The NFL was as big back then as it is now, so it was a pretty cool thing. It was it's one of those things as a boy, you dream of going to the top of the deal, and I got the opportunity to do that. So I was very grateful for that.
That's awesome. Before, I grew up watching football, like we just mentioned, but who was your favorite team that you played for?
Well, I was born in North Carolina, and then we moved right after I was born. We moved to Arlington, Texas. So I grew up my first 5 years in Arlington and got to go to a Cowboys game. And this is a cool story. I went to a game with my dad, and we were in the stadium, and I told my dad at that stadium, I said, I'm going to play here one day. And sure enough, when I was with the Saints, we went over and played in Arlington Stadium, and I saw the seats where me and my dad sat, and I thought, wow, how cool is this?
That's so cool. I love that.
I know.
It's like it's manifesting. That's what it is. And
when I was like 4 years old, I manifest to the NFL, I guess.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you've said that AA was a major part of your sobriety journey, but eventually it wasn't enough for where you were meant to be. Can you walk us through that evolution and how you found the path that worked for you?
So when I was 19 years old, my dad was an Episcopal priest, and so I went to church a lot and was in the churches. I was drinking wine as an altar boy. I started drinking very early, around 12 or 13 years old. And the first time I drank alcohol in quantity, me and a buddy of mine went down in the basement of our house, and we challenged each other to drink. We were both going to drink 3 beers out of a 6-pack. And so we slammed these 3 warm beers, and about after halfway through the second beer, I felt this like warmth go through my body. And it was the most like, oh my God, that's what God's about. That's what they're talking about. It is the best feeling in the world. And I believe firmly that from that time on, I drank different than other people. I drank only to get that feeling again, and I continued to go for that feeling. And that was my answer. It was my answer for girls. It was my answer for being cool. It was my answer for, when I had a bad game. It didn't matter. Like, I love there's been some posts, and I even did one recently that talks about alcohol's the solution, and it is the solution. It was my solution for all of my problems. And unfortunately, you don't know where that solution's going to take you. And so my first wife and I had, a pretty heavy chemical marriage. And she was having some issues and wanted to go into treatment. And I went into treatment with her, into the place to check her in. And the counselor there told me, he said, we got a bed for you too. And I said, hell no, I ain't going into treatment. I don't have any problem. I said, I'm trying to get my wife help,
Denial.
not me. Yeah, right. So he made me swear to come to his outpatient, and I said, yes, I'll do that. And basically I was going for my ex-wife, and um, I went to that first session of outpatient, and he's listing all the things that is an alcoholic. And I'm like going, oh my God, I hit every one of those.
Oh,
And so after the meeting, I went up to him and I go, man, you got me. And I said, I'm like, holy shit. He goes, well, do me a favor. Promise me that you're going to quit drinking. He said, don't quit the pain meds yet. He goes, don't drink until Thursday. And so I didn't drink till Thursday. I went to like 4 meetings, AA meetings, and I would listen, and they had some old timers in there that would talk about their stories. And I really related, and I started listening to them talk about the steps and the principles and all that. I'm like, this is all good stuff. And I liked it. And on Thursday, he said, okay, I'm not going to see you till Monday. He goes, but you're going to stop the drugs now. So I quit taking the pills on Thursday, and Friday and Saturday were like the worst days of my life. I was like, I mean, my whole body was withdrawing from that opiate, and it was the most horrible weekend I can ever remember having. And so then I get out and I white knuckled it, got done. And on Monday, he said, okay, you're sober now. He goes, there's no excuse for you to take another drug or alcohol. He goes, you need to treat this as life or death. He said, if you want to die, go back to using. If you want to die, go back to drinking. And he told me, he goes, you should go to a meeting like every day. And so I went to meetings every day for a long time. And the thing I like to tell people is, at that time, if anybody would have mentioned Jesus or anyone would have mentioned religion, I would have scurried out, because when I was 19, after my dad's bullshit with, his hypocrisy, and then I had another man that I really looked up to, and there was something that happened that, I saw the hypocrisy of what was going on in the church, and I swore I would never go to church again. And I didn't until I was like 47, I think, 46 or 47. I only went whether it's a wedding or a funeral, and I didn't go. And so I thank God for AA, because it taught me all these principles. And, you go through the book, you go through the steps, you start to learn that your problem is you, and you are the solution. You getting yourself better is the solution. And it's a phenomenal program to teach that. Now, here's what happened is down the road, my sexual addiction, some of my anger issues, some of the other things started popping up. And so I'd go to counseling, and, I got to a point, and I was in a very unhealthy marriage. I had 2 daughters. I wanted to be a really good father, but I was struggling bad. And AA was not working for me. I couldn't get the stuff. I still went to meetings. I didn't drink. I didn't do drugs. That was not going to be the solution for me. So I was searching hard, and my ex-wife took my youngest daughter down to visit her dad. And so my oldest daughter, who was about 4, I think, her and I went to church, because I kind of said, I'm going to at least give you the experience of a church. And it was in a movie theater. So we got popcorn, and we got to sit in those comfy seats. And she went to her thing with the kids. And I just sat and ate popcorn and listened to this pastor talk. And I'm like, wow, this is some good stuff. And then I came back the next Sunday, and that was probably about 13, 14 years ago. And I've been almost every single Sunday. And my relationship with God and Jesus has grown unbelievably in these last 10 years. And I don't know that I would have gotten that with AA. And the funny thing is a lot of the stuff he was talking about, I'm like, oh, I learned that in AA. And AA really is it comes from the principles of what Jesus teaches. And
We started going to we don't go there anymore, we go to a different church, but before my friend moved back from South Carolina, we were going to Calvary Meridian, and that pastor there was a recovering alcoholic. I think he had been sober for 20 or 30 years. And he would I would take notes, and then I would like post them in my YouTube community, and people would be like, that's an AA thing. And I was like, holy smokes, like
Yeah,
it
right.
really does like they go hand in hand. I mean,
Well,
I'm
and think about, I went to one of the Founders Day thing out in Ohio. I think it's in Ohio. Yeah, Ohio or somewhere out there. But anyways, I went to the Founders Day, and there was a guy that got up, and he had 53 years of sobriety, and he talked about, he goes, just imagine what Bob and Bill, what they were doing when they were going through this whole process. There's no way they could have done it on their own. It had to be inspired from a power, from God. And they literally went through everything in AA, came directly from Christian principles that Jesus taught when he was on earth. So, but again, if you would have told me that when I walked through the doors the first time, I would have said, "Fuck this, I'm out of here." You know,
yeah.
there's no way I would have gone in there and listened to what they had to say because I was so burned by what had happened in my childhood. There was just no way.
Like I took some notes today from church, and the sermon was purpose and priorities, and um it's the what part is easy, it's the how part. So like when it comes to like quitting drinking, that's the what, but how are you going to do it? And then like the other part was hope is the storm, prioritize or agonize, and then priorities are proven by what you pursue. And I mean, I like just think of all that when it comes to people that are struggling so hard with addiction.
Denial is a really, really difficult thing, and shame. This is where I got into a lot of trauma stuff because I've been married 3 times and divorced 3 times, and there's a lot more to that. And I found out recently, probably in the last 5 years, that I grew up in a pretty abusive setting. It wasn't, I mean, it was a little bit physical, but it was more verbal, and it was more, life was abusive, and some of the message that were ingrained in my head were lies. I believe it's Satan that was putting those lies into my head. And so I grew up with that, and I ended up picking women that were pretty close to the abusers that were in my life, and I was trying to get love from them, and I couldn't get it because they weren't able to do it. They were at their point where they were at in life, they weren't able to do it. And I wasn't able to go about it in the right way. So I would blow up, and I had huge anger outbursts and huge anger problems. And I'm a big guy. So it was very scary for people that were around me. And every time my ex-wives would say, get your ass to anger management. And I would go and I'd do all the anger management, and it didn't work. Well, this last time I, my last wife, she said, you got to get some help. And so I went and I researched all these different pastors, and I wanted one that was a Christian counselor, and I found him, and we were talking, and we went over the whole thing. After about 6 months, he said, you know what, Glenn? He goes, you don't have an anger problem. I'm like, well, why in the hell am I blowing up then? He goes, man, you should be angry at the stuff that's going on. That's legitimate anger issues. He goes, but you don't have an anger problem. You have a trauma problem. I'm like, whoa. I said, I've never had any, major trauma. He goes, Glenn, just playing in the NFL is enough trauma right there. He said, when our brains are young, they get messages and things put into them that the brain doesn't know how to handle. And he said about 10 years ago or so, all these counselors were working with people that were showing symptoms of PTSD, but they weren't in the army, and they weren't like majorly raped, or they weren't like in where they were malnutritioned or beaten to death when they were kids. They didn't have major trauma, but what they had was repetitive trauma to the brain. And repetitive trauma, and the best analogy I can give is you're sitting at the breakfast table, you're about 9 years old, you spill milk, and your dad starts screaming at you because he's going to be late for work and you're going to be late for school, and you got to clean up the milk and get out there. The whole way to school, he's screaming and yelling at you like, God dang it,
Yeah.
I need to be to work, da da da. And he's pounding that in you. You go to school, you feel like a piece of crap. When you come home, he's going to start yelling at you again. And you get home and you start yelling. And that memory goes into one part of your brain. So 20 years later, you're sitting with your wife and you spill milk, and she gives you a look. And all of a sudden you just like, ah, because that memory's there. And it's a completely false lie that tells you, oh my God, it's going to get ugly because you spilled milk. Well, you do the same scenario and your dad yells at you, you get in the car and your dad goes, Glenn, I'm really sorry I yelled at you. I get angry because we're going to be late. It was an accident. We need to figure out a way, a better way, so that we're not late for work and school. And maybe we need to get up a little bit earlier in case you do spill milk and it's not a big deal. So you get out of the car, you go to school, you feel pretty good about yourself. Now that memory goes in there, and 20 years later, you're sitting in it, and your wife, and you spill milk, and your wife looks at you, and you kind of smile and say, "I'm really sorry about that. I'll clean it up and take care of it. Don't worry about it, honey. It's good." So those two things really kind of show you what happens. And when you get the first scenario and you get that thing pounded in your head that you're no good, and you grow up thinking you're no good, and now all of a sudden you're an adult and you're trying to be good and you're trying to be all that, and all these things keep triggering you and they
Yeah.
keep wearing on you and you just feel like a piece of crap. And so here I am about 15 years sober, 20 years sober, and I feel like a piece of crap. I'm still not comfortable around people. I'm still like, having a hard time going into situations that scare me or that I'm not good at. Now I can walk into a room full of people and I feel totally comfortable. I have no problem. And it's because of the relationship I have with God and learning that He is my Father. I am unconditionally loved by Him. And I know that without a shadow of a doubt, no matter what I do today, He's got me. My earthly father didn't. And so I was trying to rely on Him. And I love my dad. He died probably about 10 years ago, but he died and I loved him. We had a decent relationship and that was all good. And I don't blame him because he was operating off of his trauma. But that's the problem that I think most people going into AA or having addiction issues is they have that stigma of I'm not strong enough to, this means I'm weak if I can't drink. This means I'm weak if I can't go to the bar and hang out with all these goofballs. It's like, you have that stigma of the trauma that you had when you were a kid and you're trying to fit in and you're trying to be cool. How am I going to sit around people and not have a drink in my hand? What am I going to do with my hands? There's all kinds of stuff that people go through when they try to get sober. And a lot of it's denial.
It is.
So,
I just have to touch on that whole like scenario of the dad being mad. I feel like so many of us grew up that way. And I mean, I find myself doing that with my own children. Like, no, you spilled the milk. We're gonna be late, and then we're rushing to school, and they're upset, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I literally, yeah, and I am depressed all day long. Like, I will call my husband and like on the verge of tears. Like, I feel like I need to pull my kids out because like the morning was just so shitty, and I mean, like. I sent them to school upset, and now it just like it just sits in me all day long. And so I'm like, wow, maybe and so we as a couple are like, we really need to figure this out. How do we, like we don't want them to be traumatized like we were. I mean, I probably had more trauma than he did because he was the only child, so it wasn't as chaotic and you know what I mean. But like, it's like how do we stop our traumatic experiences from when we were children to like we have to lead the way for our own children. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. This is probably a whole nother podcast, but like, it's so true. Like, ugh.
Well, that's why, Megan, I became a trauma coach. Because I saw, and here's the other thing that's really, really important to me is that there's absolutely no reason I should be sitting here talking to you right now. There is no way I should have lived longer than I did. All the stuff that I did and all the things that I did when I was younger, and I'm writing a book about it right now, but there were so many things that I was chasing. I was an excitement junkie. I was snow skiing 60 miles an hour. I was driving motorcycles at 120 miles an hour. I was jumping off of things. I was after that pursuit of that feeling that you get from drugs and alcohol and, keep going after it. And the only thing that I can equate is that I am here alive and sober through the grace of God. And he has something for me. And this trauma thing, I was a coach for a while and I helped a lot of kids at a residential treatment center. And it was a gift that I had just because I had gone through all the crap that I went through as a kid. And when I got older and got sober and worked the program, I learned how to help these kids a lot. And so I got to help, thousands of kids with that. But then life happened and things changed. And so I went into some other kind of coaching and I wasn't going very far with it. And what happened is that I learned through this trauma healing that that's what God wanted me to do. And so you are an exact person that I work with all the time because that's why I think that's why we almost all of us became alcoholics, is because we couldn't handle that trauma in our brain and that the things that happened to us. And boy, alcohol was the answer. And boy, drugs was the answer. Sex was the answer. A relationship was the answer. We were always looking for that answer because we couldn't look inside because we were hurting so bad. And I work with clients all the time that are, they're reacting and going through life, like you said, they feel bad about how they handled their kids. Well, you don't know any better. You're doing the best you can. You're going off of what your pattern was and what you were taught as a young kid. You're going off of all of that because you don't know any different. And that's not really your fault. Until I always say to people, until you learn, you're not stupid. Until you've been taught something, you're not stupid. You're only stupid if you learn it and then don't do it. So once you learn that you're hurting your kids, now what are you going to do? Learn how to handle it differently. And I made so many mistakes with my daughters. I have two wonderful daughters. Both have turned out really well. I learned a lot. And, there was a time where when they both were being born, everyone's like, oh, you want a little football player? And I'm like, no, I think I want a girl. And so both of them came out as girls, and I was so happy. And my oldest daughter was about 3 or 4, and she did something that really pissed me off. And I leaned down, and I could feel this rage inside of me. And I went to grab her, and she looked up at me with her beautiful blue eyes, and I'm like, oh, and I just melted. I'm like, that's why I wanted girls. Because if that would have been a boy, I guarantee you I would have thrown him up against the wall like my dad used to do to me. He used to, when I did something wrong, he would just go so overboard with taking it out on me. And I wasn't in a position to control myself at that time. I think now I would be able to handle it. But, 20 years ago,
I'd have
no.
to say there is something different about boys and girls because, like, if we raise our voice at my daughter or she gets in trouble, we definitely treat her differently when it comes to discipline because she's so fragile, I guess, if that makes sense. But then my boy, like, he is so tough and rough. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm glad that he has his attitude and she has her attitude because I'm like, I don't know if I could deal with a girl like this. Like, oh my gosh.
Well, and
he is me.
I'll tell you this though, Megan. Here's one of the things that people don't realize. Girls were evolutionary made to be a lot tougher than boys. And we as a society, we keep telling boys not to cry and toughen up. Boys mentally in their brains are not capable of that until way later in life. And so there's been a lot of studies done saying that, boys need to be nurtured a little longer than girls. And so I was pretty tough on my girls as far as being a little baby and crying and stuff. I'm like, no, you guys can buck up. And I think it's good to hold them a little bit accountable. And I'm not saying to baby your boy, but understand that his brain needs his mom to be very nurturing until he's probably about 17,
I mean, I could totally see that. And we talked about this in counseling, or just me. I talk about her, or I talk about my relationship with my son to her to help me navigate him. And we did the 5 love languages for children. So I know this is about alcohol and stuff, but
but where does the alcohol and drugs come out at? It comes right from what you're talking about. So it's good stuff.
and she said to do the 5 love languages for kids, and she nailed it. Everything that I talked to her, she's like, he is physical touch, and I'm like, holy shit. Like,
Yeah,
oh
right?
my gosh.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I'm like, man, I need him not to grow up the way I did. I need to make sure that both of them, but he just needs, like you said, a little bit more
I think what kids
nurturing.
need, and I think what kids need more than anything, and this is really hard for many people in the United States, but what they need is no matter when you make a mistake, for you to be honest about it and tell them that you love them and that you care about them and you're very sorry that you did whatever you did. If you can do that, I think most kids will grow up with the understanding and appreciation of how much you really cared about them, and that's what they need, you
Yeah.
know.
I guess we do apologize. Or I mean, I guess it's more me. Because I'm the stay-at-home mom. But
Yeah.
like I do apologize to them, especially like if it gets really out of hand. I'm like, I am so sorry. Like, we need to figure this out. Like, I shouldn't have acted that way. You shouldn't have acted this way. But
That's
I mean,
beautiful. Yeah.
I try. Like it, but you like it is such I'm just glad that I'm doing this sober now because alcohol triggered my past trauma so easily. And I mean, I would fly off the rocker a lot quicker when I was drunk.
Well, and I'm so grateful. That's why I say, it's through the grace of God, because if I had kids before I got sober, oh, it would not have been pretty. There's no way,
So you did opiates and alcohol at the same time?
Yeah, I pretty much was an alcoholic starting off, like I said, even in middle school and high school. And it wasn't an everyday thing. It was when I went hard. And that was when, like when you go out and you say you're only going to have two, and the next thing you know, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're missing work the next day, etc.
Yeah.
And I played sports, so it was going into college, you had to get to class and all that, and I barely made it through college, and the only reason I even went was because of sports. Otherwise, I was going to be a construction worker, and construction workers go work hard all day and then they drink all night, and that's what I wanted to do. Well, what ended up happening is down the road, and it kind of fits into my story, but I got a message kind of from my dad that really threw me for a loop, and that took the wind out of my sails. And I was very against drugs. I smoked pot once in a while. I didn't really like it, so I didn't do it very often. But I drank and I drank, and I was mainly a drinker until I think it was my third year in the NFL. And when the situation happened with my dad, I was in so much emotional pain and I didn't even realize it. I called a buddy and I said, "Hey, I need some pain medicine." And I said it was for a injury, and it could have been, but it was more for the mental. And so I started taking Percocets, and I had them in my surgeries, and I really liked them. I mean, and I loved morphine. So I started taking Percocets, and so my last probably 3 years of my drinking career, I was drinking a lot of alcohol and 5 to 15 Percocets a day. So
Jeez.
yeah, and so I would drink like a 6 to 12 pack, and I would take 5 or 6 Percocets, and I would just be a puddle. I just sit in the couch and be a puddle, and that's all I did. And my third wife, she'd be so mad at me for not going out and trying to find a job. And I did go back to school and finish my degree. I don't know how. I was plastered the whole time. I mean, I was taking pills all day long every day, and back then it was pretty easy to get them. It's not. It's a lot harder today, but I had as many as I could take. So yeah, it was both.
Oh
And I
my
and
gosh.
I
Did you?
I heard a guy one time say in a meeting, he said, "I am so grateful for the drugs that I started taking because they took me down fast. If I would have just been drinking, I probably could have been a um
Functioning alcoholic
functional
for years.
alcoholic for like 25 years.
Uh,
And I don't think I would have been, because I lived on the edge too much, and I think I would have killed. I actually tried to kill myself twice, to be honest with you. And
on
um, you
pills
know,
or with pills?
no, I was driving the car and I was so upset. It was some stuff going on with my first wife that I literally aimed my car at like 90 miles an hour right at a telephone pole. and I pulled the steering wheel to hit the telephone pole, and my car literally spun around the pole and then stopped and died right there. And I'm like, oh, I can't even kill myself, right? So I
Because
did it.
there's more for your life than, I mean, there's a
It
purpose for
is.
your life. That is
It
why
is.
it was not your
Yeah.
time.
Yep. It wasn't my time, and I did it twice. I tried it twice, and it failed both times. So I knew it was, and that kind of helped me when I got into, the higher power thing in AA. I started thinking, yeah, God really did, my higher power really did want me to live. So,
Oh my gosh,
and
it
now
gives
I
me
know this is what he wants me to do. There's just been too many things that have happened lately.
yeah. Can you take us down like one of your worst uh moments of drinking? I mean, obviously trying to take your own life is like
Yeah, that was
obvious
pretty
that
bad. That was pretty bad. But I think there was a girl I was dating from college, and I was in playing in New Orleans, and man, I tell you, this girl I thought was the greatest thing in the world, and I was so wanting to be with her and go for it. And I finally convinced her to date me, and so we dated for a little while, and she came down to visit me in New Orleans, and I was so pissed at myself because I started drinking early, and I got really ugly. I blacked out. She wanted nothing to do with me forever. I mean, I never could get her to forgive me. And she said, "You got a problem." And the next day, I was absolutely convinced that I did not have a problem, that it was her that did it. And after I sobered up and looked back on it, I'm like, wow, I gave up probably one of the coolest, sweetest people I would have ever, been with. And it was all because of alcohol. And it really, it hurt me bad. So there's another time, like this is one time that scared me. I'm in New Orleans, and I'm out at a place that I would go to, a friend of mine's, and I'm driving home the next day, or I'm driving home after I went to the bar, which was stupid, but that's what I decided to do. And I drove 16 hours from New Orleans to Wisconsin, where my parents were staying. I went in and laid down and went to sleep, and my mom came in and was banging on the door and said, "Hey, the police are on the phone." And so I
oh,
get on the phone, and the police officer says, "Sir, were you in New Orleans last night?" And I said, "No, I'm in Wisconsin." "Or are you in New Orleans?" I said, "No, I'm in Wisconsin right now." He goes, "Oh." He goes, "Well, your truck was in a hit and run last night." I said, "I don't think so, because I'm up here." And I said, "Hang on one second." And I ran outside. There was a huge dent in the front right of my truck.
oh my gosh.
Shit. So I came running. I said, "No, there's no there. My truck's fine." I said, "No." He goes, "Well, you smashed a van, and you reported with your license plate number, and your truck was this big black truck that I had. They saw you driving out and basically hit a van, pushed the van into a person, smashed the whole side of the van, and I went and got my truck fixed and and I denied everything, and I never got a call back." But those are some of those things that, to this day, a lot of times when I go through Starbucks, I'll pay for the person behind me, and I say, "God, this is for whoever I hurt that I can't repay," because there's no way I could find out who that had that van. Um,
Yeah.
but those are the types of things where I know I did a lot of damage to people. I hurt a lot of people. I mean, I had numerous girlfriends that I know I hurt with my alcohol. So that's the hard part for me, is realizing that I'm not a bad guy. I do care about people. I don't like to hurt people, but I did it a lot when I was drinking.
I think a lot of us do. And I think a lot of us don't realize that we're hurting people until we actually get sober and we're like, "Oh, I was
Yeah.
such an asshole." Like,
Right. I know.
I know a lot of people that like if they got sober, they would look back at their behavior and be like, "Oh, I am wrong." Like it's just, but you don't know it until you're out of it.
Like I
And
said,
I
we're not stupid if we don't know it. And unfortunately, most of us probably didn't have the best role models to teach us. So
Yeah,
we were going through with whatever we had, to guide us through life. And normally it's not very good.
exactly. Um, so for those listening who might be early in their sobriety or feeling stuck, what was the most difficult part of those early days for you, and how did you overcome them?
There was a couple times where I remember one time I'm driving by this tavern that I used to go to, and I'm not thinking about anything. I'm in a totally fine space, and all of a sudden I started seeing it up ahead, and the sign got really big, and it almost was like, am I supposed to go there? I was kind of like, I was questioning in my mind, should I? And I drove past it, and I just said, okay, God, get me through this. The guy, I'm not a big fan of the sponsor thing. I think, the AA tells you whenever there's help needed, you reach, when you reach out the hand and you help whoever. Some of the sponsor stuff gets into too much, like I remember when I went to one meeting and the sponsors were having their sponsees mow their lawn, and I'm like, no, that's not what it's about. And so I really do, I like to tell people I will always be there to help you. You call me, and I tell the people that I work with that I don't know real good, but I'll tell them, hey, call me before you take the drink. Because once you take the drink, I don't want to talk to you. I want nothing to do
Yeah.
with you. And I don't really coach a lot of alcoholics because they need to go get sober. They need to go either to treatment, or they need to go get in an AA program or some of these newer programs that are out there. Get your ass sober for 6 months to a year, and then I can start working with you. Um, and there's a lot of people out there that will help people through the first two, 3 or 4 steps. So get into the fourth and fifth step, and then some people will need more help after that, other than the program. But um, when you're stuck or when you're feeling it, you need to make a phone call, or you need to drive over to someone's house. You need to have a group of people that you can go to. I didn't drink coffee until I quit uh, drinking alcohol, and I drink coffee every day now. And I have a lot of coffee buddies that I'll say, I need a cup of coffee. And we would go and get to a coffee shop and talk. And the biggest thing that I think is really helpful, at least it was for me, is I had a guy drill it into my head. And this guy had a lot of years of sobriety. He said, this 90 meetings in 90 days, that's bullshit. He goes, what do you do on day 91?
Right.
You go to a meeting or don't you? He said, so you need a meeting when you need a meeting. So when I would get squirrely, or I would get to thinking about drinking, or I would get to do anything, I would immediately find the nearest, soonest meeting I could get to. I would go to a meeting, because every time I went, by the time the meeting was done, even if it was a bullshit meeting that a bunch of people rambled on about stupid shit, after the meeting was over, I always, always felt like I could get it through another day. So
Yeah.
you need a meeting when you need a meeting. You need to call people, and you need to have a stable of people that you can call at any time, no matter what, 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever time it is. You got to have these people that you can call and allow them to talk you out of it. That's the biggest thing, is you got to want it. There's a lot of people that I've worked with over the years that you can tell they don't want it. They're just doing it
Yeah.
because they want their wife back, or they want to see their kids, or, they want this or they want that. They don't want to get sober. They want their shit back, and they don't understand that the alcohol is the reason they don't have their shit. So they'll go to any lengths to get their shit back without quitting to drink alcohol.
Oh man.
Right?
I grew up with this family, and I mean, back in the 90s, drinking and driving, always had a beer in his hand. All the kids were always in the back of the truck. I mean, woke up with a beer in his hand, went to bed with a beer in his hand. I'm pretty sure he eventually lost his job because of alcohol. But the day that at his memorial, his ex-wife had mentioned, now I know he's no longer drinking. And I'm like, that like, and now that like just lives in me. I'm like, holy, like, is that what we say at all alcoholics like memorials? Is like, well, now you're done drinking.
You have three options. Three options only if you're an alcoholic. And I can tell you how you can figure out if you're an alcoholic. It's pretty easy. But you got three options. You got recovery, you got institution, or you got death. And everybody gets to choose their bottom. I worked with a guy for a couple years. He had gotten into a motorcycle accident and he lost his leg. So he had a prosthetic leg. And one day he calls me and says, Glenn, I don't have my leg. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have your leg? He goes, I gave it to the dope dealer as a down payment. I'm like, are you ever going to see your leg again? Because I don't know. So this dude didn't have a leg. He gave it to the dope dealer to get his dope. And his name was BJ. And I said, BJ, you got to pick your freaking bottom. Is losing your leg enough or do you need something else? And well, he got into a scenario where he went to school, he got into this college, and they had this program that would help. And he was a vet, helped him get a leg. So he got this like $10,000 prosthetic leg that was really cool. I mean, it was like, wow, dude, this is cool. And like 3 weeks later, he calls me again. And he goes, yeah, my leg's gone. I'm like,
Oh my
damn it.
gosh.
I'm like, what is your bottom, dude? And probably about a month and a half later, he was dead. And it's like, death is a lot of people's bottom. And I always tell people when I work with them, I'm like, you got to pick your bottom, and it has to be bad enough that you remember, so that when you want to go drink again or take that pill or smoke that whatever, that you remember how bad it was. And to me, if I would have lost my leg, I think that would have been bad enough that I would have said, no, I'm not going to do this again. But there are people, and you don't know how far their bottoms are going to go. And a lot of times, you got people that are 6, 8, 10, 12 years sober, and all of a sudden they go out again. And I really believe that one of the reasons they do is they forgot how bad it was
Yeah.
when they got sober.
They
So
stopped playing that tape forward.
yep, always remember that last drink and that last drunk and that last misery that you felt. There's nothing wrong with remembering the good times. I had some great times when I was drinking. I mean, I can tell you some fun stories and some fun things that I did. I remember those, but then immediately afterwards, I need to remember that last drunk, because I like to say that my disease, if you tease your disease, it's going to come back and haunt you. Don't tease it. Make sure that he knows that addict that's in my head, make sure that addict knows that if I drink or do whatever, we're going right back to that worst case scenario.
Yeah. And I wish people would play that tape forward way more often. And I never realized that I was actually doing this. And then I started having podcasts with people, and they're like, "Oh, I play the tape forward," and I was like, "I've been doing that the whole entire time, and I didn't realize I was actually doing that."
Right?
But
Yeah.
it's so true. And like, how much, like, what does your rock bottom have to look like for you? Like, it's so sad, because like, is losing a relationship with your child, like, is that not rock bottom enough for you? Like, is like being on your deathbed, like, there's people that comment on my stuff and they're literally on their deathbed and they still don't want to give up alcohol. And it's just so hard for me, because I guess as soon as our kids started noticing our drinking and saying stuff, it's like, ooh, I don't want I want to ruin my relationship with my children because of alcohol. I've seen it happen too many times in life. And I mean, we're dealing with that right now. It's like alcohol is the number one choice. And it's so sick. It just is really
Well,
upsetting.
I was working with a guy who I know he loved his kids. Oh my God, did he love his kids? And he had an okay job. I mean, he had a job that he could pay his bills, but he couldn't. He wanted more money. He wanted more things. He wanted more stuff. And I would say to him, just do your job, take care of your kids. That's all you need to do. You don't need more right now. Just focus on getting through your days. I think he maybe had like 6 months or so. And he was I just said, just stay in the day. Stay, that one day at a time is so freaking important.
Yeah.
Don't worry about yesterday. Don't be thinking about tomorrow. Stay in today. Be there. Well, he had to make more money. And so he started dealing drugs. And he was trying to do it sober, just to make money. Well, he got caught by the police and had to go to jail. And now he's sitting in jail, not being able to see his kids. His ex-wife took the kids, got 100% custody because now he was in jail, started drinking or using or something in jail, came out, was using. And, you know, that is how powerful the disease is, because, Megan, the love you have for your two kids. I know the love I had for my two kids. I can't even imagine these people that are putting their kids in jeopardy because they need to have drugs or alcohol. But
Yeah.
yet it's all over the place. You see it everywhere. And that's how
We watch it on
powerful it is.
YouTube. Like
Yeah.
we've been watching like these terrible I don't like not they're terrible. Like this mom was on something whacked out of her head and she shot her kids. I mean, like if there's more stories that we watch, but it's like it's so sad to me that like I don't know, this world that we live in is very
Well, the world's
sad.
been that way forever. I mean, I know a lot of us are saying, and here's why. Our country was very spoiled for quite a while. Ever since World War II, our country's been very easy to live in. It's been anybody can get a job almost any time. That's how it was up until probably 15 or 20 years ago. And now all of a sudden we're becoming a lot like the rest of the world. We've got a lot of really wealthy people at the top. Our poor class is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Our middle class is getting smaller. And it's becoming a tougher world to live in than what our parents were used to and our grandparents were used to. My kids, your kids, they're going to grow up in a world that's going to be way different than our world was. And it's not worse. It might be more challenging. There's always been pedophiles, there's always been alcoholics, there's always been sex addicts, there's always been murderers, robbers, all that kind of stuff. It's all there. The key is, where's your relationship with your higher power? You know, like this whole election thing, the way it was so polarized. I kept going to the Bible and looking to see what Jesus said, and he said, you vote your conscience, and then you follow the rules of the law. You pay Caesar what Caesar's owed. So it didn't matter whether it was the left or the right that got in as president. That was going to be our president that was appointed by God, and he put him there, and we are to follow him. That's something that an addict and an alcoholic is important to have, is don't go down that rabbit hole with like politics or the world's going to come to an end or whatever. Because as soon as you start thinking that way, you're like, fuck it. May as well drink anyways. This world sucks. No, it doesn't. I did Uber for a while because I was hurting for some money and I was bored. And I couldn't believe how many cool people I met. People are really cool. Most of the people in this world are decent, good people. The ones on the news and the ones that are all over social media, they're not.
Yeah.
So, but we don't hang out with those people as much as we think we do. We just see it and hear it all the time. But really, you go around your neighborhoods, there's many cool people. And, when you go to a meeting, if it sucks and the people are idiots, go to another one. There's thousands of meetings. You don't have to go to one just because it's a meeting. Find ones where there's cool people. And I always tell people, as you're going through, and I had a guy that was a sponsor, and he didn't have a driver's license. He was way overweight. He was on disability, smoked like a pack and a half cigarettes a day. And I'm going to this guy working through the steps. And at one point I'm driving him to a meeting and I look at him, I go, "What? Why are you not getting a driver's license?" I said, "I don't need one." I'm like, "Well, it would sure help that I didn't have to go driving you to all these meetings all the time." And I said, I'll help you get one. I'll help you get a car. I'll help you get a better job. All of a sudden I was trying to help him. And what I realized is at that point, here I am. Right before I went into the program, I wanted to get into a motorcycle gang and I wanted to do all this crazy shit. And then as I got sober, I started realizing, no, I want to be a productive member of society. I want to be like, a guy that can be a leader at work and that. And I look at him and I said, why am I picking him to be my sponsor? I don't want to be like him. So then I started thinking, you go look for winners. You go look for people that you want to be like.
Yeah.
You want to go find people that have good marriages. You want to find people that are good parents. You want to find people that are going to PTA meetings and they're going to church or they're going to community functions. Those are what early alcoholics should start looking for. Don't look for the ones that are going to, sneak a drink or go do and lie about shit and do so, because you can find them anywhere and they're not
Mhm.
the best thing for you.
Exactly. Oh my
And
gosh.
again, the whole basis of the program is it's a choice.
Yeah.
Like I see a lot of times when when I was first in the program, I would do all that service work, which I really liked. Some of it I didn't, but most of it I did. And I'd have to sign those papers from people that were forced to go to meetings, and I'd have to sign that they were there. And I would sign them. And I'd say, you know what, this doesn't mean shit because you're here. If you're here because of this piece of paper
Or order.
or court order, you're not going to make it unless you want to be here. And I would always try to tell them that. And that's the key is you got to want it and you got to make there. It's your choice.
Mhm.
When they say put the plug in the jug, it's your choice to unplug it. No one else's. It's yours.
I always tell people, like, even when, like, with personal training, like, I can't hold your hand. Like, it has to be
Right.
your choice. Like, you have to do the work. I can help guide you. I can coach you. I can train you, but I can't hold your hand 24/7, 365. Like, you have to do the work. Like, I can't
Yeah.
make up your mind for you. You have to do it. Like, I have people reach out to me all the time, like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, I don't know how to help you if you don't want to help yourself any more than, like, I've tried helping you.
I like to tell people, hey, I can tell you what to do, or there's this thing that came out. It's really cool. It's called Google. If you don't want to listen to me, go look at Google and see what it has to say, because you ain't listening to shit right now.
Right.
And
And
again,
sometimes,
take the cotton out of your mouth or take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth. Shut the
yeah.
hell up and listen.
Yeah. And sometimes, like what worked for me isn't going to work for you. And I just did a podcast with a chick yesterday and she did 75 hard because I did 75 hard. I started 7-10-23 and she started 7-5-23. And we were just talking about that. Like, that worked for us. Will that work for everybody else? No. But
No.
like, it literally, she did it to quit drinking. I just did it because everybody else was doing. I mean, a group of us were doing it, but like, I didn't go in with the intentions of quitting drinking, and here I am. I never wanted to drink again. And AA works for some people. Like, some people have to go to rehab, some people do outpatient. I mean, like, what works for one isn't going to always work for the other, but like, you have to figure out your
I
how.
here's one of the things I've learned recently, and there's a lot of new recovery type programs, and a lot of them are out there, especially on social media, saying, that's bullshit. You got to call yourself an alcoholic, etc. And I kind of took offense to that for a while, and and I've come to the point where, like me, it was through the grace of God, and He was the one that was guiding me and leading me to where I needed to go to learn. So I watched this guy. I don't know if you've heard of Jelly Roll.
Yeah.
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 So I love his music, and I heard his songs right off the get-go, and I love his story. But he's one of those ones that I kind of have a little bit of a problem with, and I've gotten over it, and I'll tell you why. But he's standing up there talking about how he's in recovery, but he still drinks and smokes dope. I'm like, well, you're in recovery from the hard shit, right? But just wait, because at some point you're probably going to have to get into recovery from the drugs, from the pot and the alcohol. Because if you have an addictive brain and if you're an addict, it doesn't matter whether it's sex, food, whatever, until you fix whatever's inside you, you're going to become that addict. And so with people like that, the only thing that scares me is a lot of people I remember back in the 80s, late 80s. No, it would have been in the 90s. There was CA was really popular, Cocaine Anonymous, and a lot of CA meetings were saying that it's okay to drink. We just have to give up the coke. And, for me, I know whenever I wanted to go, if I got on alcohol and I couldn't get a good enough drunk and I ran into certain people, I'd go down that road and grab some Coke or some ecstasy or whatever. And I didn't want to do that when I started out, but I would. So I just think, people need to be careful and they need to really decide what they want for their life.
Yeah.
I've got a couple people that I'm working with now who they don't really think they're alcoholics. But what's funny is they want to quit drinking. And I'm like, well, why do you want to quit drinking? Well, just because it's a health thing. I want my health to be better. And then I'll talk to them a couple weeks later. I'm like, how's it going? Well, I kind of had a couple slips. So what I tell people is if you want to really find out if you have a problem with alcohol, is you pick a number of drinks, and I would normally say less than two, and you pick a time period, either 6 months or a year, and I say hopefully it's a year, and then you pick the number of days a week that you allow yourself to have one or two drinks. And even if there's a big shadoo comes up, you only have two. Even though it's something that you used to get hammered at, you only have two. If you can do that for a year or 6 months, you probably don't have a problem with alcohol. 90% of the people that do that, I never hear from again because they're out partying their ass off and they're like, fuck it.
Yeah.
You can't just quit doing it for 3 to 6 months. I did that. I quit for like 4.5 months. And then I started drinking again and I went right back to the way I was before I quit drinking. That alcohol in your brain is what's causing the problem. So, you've got to put it in your brain to find out if you have a problem with it. And that's why I always tell people, and if you do more, and you're the only one that's going to know, because I'll tell people, I know people that'll have a drink before they go out and then they don't count that one, well,
I mean, that was me. I mean, I've been told that I had the problem, even though I've never I was told Megan had the problem. We don't have the problem. And I was like, I'm not the one hiding my alcohol, and I'm not the one that can't stop drinking, and I'm not the one that I'm the one that stayed sober once I decided to quit drinking. So who has the problem here? You're
Right.
still full on functioning alcoholic, and here I am, the sober one.
That was the hardest thing for me early on, is to not judge other people and to realize it doesn't matter whether they quit or not. Because I would tell people all the time, I'm like, you're fucking drunk yourself, dude. And they think,
Right?
oh, I'm nothing like you. I'm like, okay, well,
Oh,
it sure
it's
looked
so
like it to
annoying.
me. Yeah. And then the
So
worst thing was, this is the funniest thing. I mean, it's like, okay, I go through the steps. I get to the one where I'm making amends. And I make the list. I did all the stuff you're supposed to do. Well, I went to my family members and I said, I'm really sorry for this. And I really apologize for that. And then right away I went, but if you wouldn't have done this, and if you wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have done the things and I'm like right away blaming them. And they're looking at me going, what kind of amends are these? And I'm like, I guess I screwed up. But, people are going to do what they're going to do. The bottom line, Megan, and I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, or not podcasts, TikToks and stuff. And you've got some great things to say, and I think you get it. But the bottom line is, you have to take care of yourself, and you have to worry about yourself and yourself only. You're gonna, at some point in your life, you're gonna have a really good friend that's gonna be sober with you, and they're gonna decide to go back out there. I've had good friends that I've lost to death and other things because they couldn't stay sober. And I could have easily went down that road with them, but I had to make that decision to let them go. I couldn't control them. I couldn't tell them what to do. They weren't listening to me. And what I tell people is, you take a blanket, you close your eyes, you take a blanket, you wrap it around them, put them in your arms, and then you give them to God.
Right.
And then you're done. So many of us want to try and save everybody, and you can't save people that don't want to be saved. And you will know at a point when someone's listening to you and they're taking what you're saying and they're making changes. And those people are ones you want to feed and you want to keep working with. There's a lot of them that you just say what you're going to say, do what you're going to do. Like, I'll coach people and I'll go through the whole scenario of, trauma, whatever, and I'll watch them and I'll see, and I'll get a pretty good feel if they're really willing to work on getting better. And if they don't, I'll just say to myself, it's not time yet. They're not ready, you know.
No, so
And
true.
and that's with what you're doing. I think it's going to be really important for you to recognize that and realize that, because I know you're helping a lot of people, and I know you're doing, you know, if I would have had this kind of stuff when I was first getting sober, I would have loved it. I would have ate it up. I would have watched it all the time because I was a sponge. I read book after book after book. Going to meetings, I would listen to those old timers like they were my best friend, and I would just listen. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that, and but I was hungry, and not everyone's hungry.
Yeah. I love the testimonies, and that's like what powers me to keep doing what I'm doing and me stay sober. Like I I'm I feel like I'm just like I'm different than some of the people that have tried quitting drinking, because I only had like one day one where actually I didn't even have a day one. I just started 75 hard. Never in my life did I say I was gonna like I never went into it like said I'm gonna quit drinking. Like obviously I've told myself I need to cut back, but I never said I was going to quit drinking. And then I did 75
Right.
hard, and I was like, oh, I can't wait till day 76 to have a watermelon margarita.
Right.
And then like I think I did my very first drinking video like day 50 or 53. But obviously prior to that, I decided like I don't want to drink anymore. So it was like after the 3-week mark, I feel like that was the hardest part, getting through those first 3 weeks, adjusting. Like, and I did like I'm still like 20 what takes 21 days to create a habit. So like getting past those first 3 weeks was very crucial, and then I was like, I don't need this anymore. Like, and that was the very first time I said I'm done drinking. Like I never prior to this have I ever said I'm gonna quit drinking. Like my husband and I would get in tons of fights like through the last 15 years almost of me drinking, and him too, like in the beginning, but then it ended up being mainly me, because I was the fun drunk. So I mean, like it's like, well, you need to quit drinking. I think we need to really reevaluate your drinking habits, and like all those stories. And then I've had friends be like, well, I don't have a drinking problem like you, I never really drank like you, but guess who's still drinking and guess who's not drinking? Like, who had the problem? Like, you're probably secretly drinking way more than I was. But like, since I was so open about it, like I was open about my drunkenness, and I'm open about my sobriety. So like, I was just telling my friend that, or my husband that, I said, there was 3 of us. I'm not going to name names. There was 3 of us. 2 of us drank out loud, like all the time. We were the drunks. One of them, like, never was really out loud with her drinking. 2 of us are sober. One of them is still drinking. And I'm like, but you're the one struggling right now with like mental issues and health issues and weight issues. But yet, like, here we're the drunk ones. Like, we're sober. It just amazes me.
And it will continue to amaze you. Like I said, I've been sober. It'll be 31 years here coming up at the end of the month if I don't drink until then, which I probably won't. But I have seen and watched so many things happen that you just sit there and shake your head and go, And it's all you can do is just go, boy, that's interesting. And it's like, but I don't want to do it. And so that's again what you're putting out to the world is, it's cool to be sober. When I listen to your TikToks, you talk a lot about how it's just cool to be sober, to not drink, and to live a life and feel the pains of life, watch your kids go through pains and realize, hey, maybe I was a part of that and I can change that.
Mm-hmm.
When you're drunk or drinking, you don't think that. You think, you little annoying piece of shit. What are you bothering me so bad for? I need a drink. Da 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 da. And then you go, and again, it's really a selfish program. I can't emphasize that enough. Once you get to the point like I did, where you get into, further down the road where you can give back. And, when like for me, when I started going to church and I started to read and follow what Jesus says, and that's all about helping our neighbors. And, you can't help your neighbors if you don't have wisdom, and you can't help your neighbors if you're going to help them get drunk, or you can't help them, if you're going to not stand up and do the right thing. And, even though, like you said, your three friends, that one that's still drinking, they probably look at you like, well, they're watching you. I'm guarantee you she's watching you. And
Oh
she's
yeah.
wondering inside her head, maybe I should do that. And that'll be totally up to her. But if you keep doing the positive things and keep living your life the way you're doing it, you're going to find that people are going to start jumping on board, and you'll be grateful that you've helped so many people.
What you just said reminded me of what also the pastor said today in church. Experience can trump education. It's like, I don't have a 4-year degree and teaching you how to like stay sober, but I have the experience. Like, would you go to a marriage counselor who's never been married?
Right.
Just because they have a 4-year degree doesn't mean that they're going to give you the best advice. Like, you have to have the experience. And
Absolutely.
I mean, I feel like sometimes I underestimate myself. It's like, well, I don't have like any type of like super, like maybe I should go back to college to get like an actual degree or whatever. And I'm like, no, I have the experience. And a lot of like I've talked to one of my psychologist, the one that prescribes me medication. He's LDS. He's never drank. So like it's hard to relate to him when it comes to alcohol. But like I have, had like I have a counselor who like has had all the life experiences. She's been married, she's been divorced, she's had kids, she has, been around drinking. It's like, see, you got to find somebody that has the same experience. Like nobody's going to be able to help you through it if they don't have your experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I completely agree with you on that. And I think for me, I was at about, it's probably been about 10 years ago. I was at a point where I was wanting to change careers, change into something different. I was thinking about going to school to get a degree in counseling. And I thought, I don't want to go to school for 2 years for that. And so I went down the coaching route, and I went and got certified as a coach, and I started coaching. And what I was coaching was cool. And I had a lot of clients, but what I found was most of the clients didn't want to do the work. And so I ended up, a lot of the clients, I gave their money back and I said, we're not good. But what I have found, Megan, is, and you may think about doing this because you call yourself a sober coach, right? Isn't that what your tag is? If you want to be, if you're going to be a coach, whether you're certified or not, here's what I found by being a coach is I narrowed down my topic of what I work with people. And so I work on complex PTSD, or I'll work on some like, shoot, I'm forgetting the name of it. Intervention. I'll do some intervention with families when they've got an addict or an alcoholic that's causing them grief, and I'll go in and I'll work with the people that are living with that addict and alcohol, and I'll give them suggestions and things to do. But here's the thing that's really important: find what that little thing is, because if there's a little thing that can change a person's life, like complex PTSD, the clients that I work with, when we get to the root cause of what that trauma has done to their adult life, and we give them changes to fix so that they don't keep getting traumatized or triggered, they live a much better life. And you can do it really quickly. It doesn't take years. I always tell people, 6 months is usually I usually work with people for 6 months, and then we're done. We've done what we need to do. And that's a little different than counseling, because counseling goes into a lot more of the psychoanalyzing and that kind of stuff, which is great. I have a counselor. I go to counseling. I love counseling. Don't hear me wrong. But I like the fact that when I coach, I can get right to the root cause. We can fix it, and we can change your life like within 6 months.
Yeah.
And people love that. And, I think there's a thing for it. And again, if I have somebody who's got some stuff going on majorly in their head, I will always refer them to, a professional. I'm not going to go down that road. But
yeah,
I think you as a sober coach, I think, man, as young as you are and what you've gone through and what you're doing, you will really be able to help people. And I don't think you needed a degree. The thing with the internet and, like I work from people all over. I got people from Arkansas, California, Oregon. I mean, all these different places I have clients. And with the internet, you don't need to have an office and you don't need to have a degree. What you need
Yeah.
to have is you need to have expertise that help people. Because when they tell people and when you do like the TikToks and all those videos and they see you and they hear what you have to say, they go, "Oh, I want that person to help me. Man, she sounds cool." And I saw you. I mean, I saw one of your TikToks and I'm like, "Oh, I like what she's doing." And when I saw you had a podcast, I'm like, "I want to get on that because as many chances as I can get on podcasts or get on different things, it puts you as like the expert, and you are an expert. You hadn't been sober. I mean, a year and a half is a great job. Uh, 90% or more, probably 98% never get to where you are. But
Yeah,
that's
that first year
still
is the
it's
hardest.
the hardest. And I that's great, but you're still young in sobriety. I mean, you're still going to have
Yeah.
a lot more to go through, and that'll be cool because you are so good at like telling your side of it. You're not afraid to tell your story. And that's the
I always
biggest thing I think to help people.
I always joke, and this is like with another friend of mine and my husband. I'm like, I'm gonna be the Megyn Kelly of sobriety. Like, I don't know, like 'cause she's just
I
so
like
like,
it. Yeah.
like
Put
I
it in
don't
their
mind being
face. Yeah.
controversial. I don't mean like, yeah, it's I
Put it in their
and I
face.
can
That's
take
the
heat.
great. Yeah.
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 Like
I
I don't
love it.
mind people. I get haters. I get, like people coming at me like, "Oh, now you're charging." I'm like, "I ain't charging for videos. I'm charging for a community." Like because the YouTube algorithm, and I'm like, why? I don't really need to explain myself to you. Maybe like you have no idea what you're talking about.
No,
Like,
stop.
and so
Yeah.
like, and
Stop explaining. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. And
and
real
then
and
like,
realize this. This is so important, Megan. Sorry to interrupt, but this is really important. When you chose to follow when I got baptized and chose to follow, my life all of a sudden, I had so many haters and so many people that were like coming at me in all different
yeah,
directions. That's Satan. He's pissed that you're following Jesus and he's going to try and wreck your life so you go back to him. Same thing with the drinking. As soon as you stop drinking, and I had the same thing, I can't tell you how many girls or women and guys that would come to me, "You don't have a problem. Why do you think you have a problem?" And I'd be like, and sometimes I'd be like, do I have a problem? And I'd have to question it.
yeah,
And it really was. And I'm telling you, it's so freaking important to realize that's Satan. That's what he's putting those people into your life to try and draw you away from Jesus and try and draw you away from good sobriety. And it's
exactly.
going to happen to you from all angles. There's going to be people trying to get in between your marriage. There's going to be people trying to get in between you and your kids. I mean, I remember sometimes when I would have these people say things about how I was raising my daughter, and I'd get so freaking mad. I'm like, "How dare you tell me how to raise my daughter?" And then I realized, oh, that's just one of those Satan things. He's just one of those sorry ass guys that thinks he knows it all. He
Yeah.
don't know shit.
Oh, I mean, I had a lot of haters in the very beginning, especially like, "Oh, girl, you don't have a problem," like because of my kitchen. I'm like, "Oh, because I live in a 70s house and my kitchen got remodeled because the house was gutted by somebody else." Like
Yeah.
people are just like, "You don't even know what you're talking about." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever." Mine is just an experience and I resonate with a lot of people, and a lot of people have like the alcohol use disorder like I had. And I feel like that just resonates with a lot of people. And, yeah, there are people that I have helped that have been way worse off than me. And I'm like, wow, I helped that person come up off the ground, like suicidal. And like, I mean, it's
You got to keep being you because you're an awesome you. Like I said, I wouldn't have reached out to you if I would have saw anything that was like um, fake or phony or and I'm a little hesitant with some of these newer fangled like I can teach you how to drink. That's one that kills me because if somebody would have tried to do that with me, there's no freaking way I could have ever learned how to drink appropriately. There's no way. I mean, there's no, you know, there's just no absolute way that I could have ever done that. And I know that about myself. And maybe there are people out there that can do it. And
There
there's a
are
lot of
people,
people
but
preaching it, but it ain't
yeah,
me.
moderation. I'm like, I can balance and moderate sugar. I can't balance and moderate alcohol. Like, just like some people can't balance and moderate sugar. Like, I pick, uh, all of our brains are wired differently, and there was no two for me. There is 20 in one night.
I
Like,
I got to tell the story. Just I don't know how much longer we can go, but this story you'll crack up at this. So I was early in sobriety, and I had a house, and um, I was looking for some roommates. So I had a couple people from the program that were looking for a place to live. So we had this one guy, and there's like four of us, I think, four men living in the house. And one of the guys told me, he said, I have a sugar addiction. I'm like, oh, all right, whatever. Didn't think anything of it. I came home one night. He's literally passed out on the floor. There's a gallon tub that's like three quarters empty. And I tried to wake him up, and he was like comatose. I'm like,
oh my
Wally,
God.
what are you doing? You know, his name was Wally. I'm like, Wally, what are you doing? Huh? And the guy, he was completely out of it. So the next day, I'm like, Wally, what was wrong with you? He goes, I told you I'm a sugar addict. He goes, the sugar affects me the same way alcohol affects others. So he
Wow.
literally was in AA because he eats too much ice cream.
That is crazy. I'm telling you, that's why
Oh,
everybody has a different struggle,
right.
and like it's crazy because it all comes back, like it's all linked to mental health, I guess.
Well, and again, it's your body and our bodies. Is there people out there that can have a drink or two? Absolutely. I know a guy who once a year he goes back to his college for Oktoberfest, and they rent a hotel. They have a designated driver, and they just get hammered for 3 days. He does it
Oh,
once a year. He's been doing it for 20 years. It's the only time he drinks. He doesn't drink the rest of the year. That's his one thing. Is that wrong? I don't know. I mean, I would never want to do it, but
mm-mm.
it's individual choices. It's individual people deciding. Thank God for AA. I know there's a lot of people that hate it, that talk bad about being an alcoholic. Like that's demeaning. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a pride thing because, for me to go through what I went through and to be sitting here 30 some years later, being able to talk about, you know, painful trauma stuff, kids stuff, all of that, and I've been able to work through it. That's pride. I pride myself in saying I am an alcoholic and I'm recovering. My name's Glenn and I'm an alcoholic. I love that. And it's unfortunate there's a lot of people that are missing out on that because social media is really pushing hard to say you don't need to call yourself an alcoholic, and you can drink in moderation, and you just need to learn these things about yourself. Well,
Yeah, I feel you.
I'm not going down that road.
I think pride gets in the way of a lot of people even asking for help. But
That too, yeah.
I really appreciate you being here. You guys can find him at glenderby.com.
Yep,
And you're also on TikTok and Instagram.
yep.
And everything
So
will be in the
yes,
description.
yep, that's awesome. I really appreciate you having me, Megan, and I'm so proud of you. I
Thank you.
really, it's so fun to watch people coming up and getting sober and helping others and using this platform to do that. I think it's spectacular, and
Yeah,
I'm really proud of you.
I appreciate that.